Everyone wants to return peace to Donbass, but only in words. Armed conflicts, bloodshed. This is absolutely not our choice. But the promises for 8 years have not coincided with reality. When someone starts talking to me that the president of the Russian Federation says, I say, please, let him tell me in your presence that we are not ready to do something. What the residents of Donbass are waiting for in the face of new threats from the Kremlin. Development of Ukraine is the death of Russian Federation. On a frosty morning, Andriy opens a kiosk where he is engaged in the business of his life. For more than 20 years, he has been making keys of any size and complexity. He started his favorite business in native Donetsk, but for almost 8 years he has been living with his wife in Kyiv. To be honest, we don't plan to return. But of course we hope that everything will be decided, peace will come. Because our people are there, this is my hometown. I lived there all my life before I left. In summer 2021, Andriy visited temporarily uncontrolled Donetsk for the first time after a long period. His father died. Due to the blocked checkpoints from certain districts of the Donetsk region, he traveled through the territory of the Russian Federation. Donetsk looked sadly worse than I expected.
Я как-то сказал такую фразу, я считаю, это самое правильное. На паузе город сейчас. Вот он не развивается. Как я говорил, что лучшая характеристика – это то, что он не изменился, это в лучшем случае. А в худшем там многие места, конечно, в таком упадке, разруха.
Moreover, even those areas where the war did not ruin.
Не зацепило. Все хотят, чтобы это закончилось, но, честно говоря, пессимистические настроения у людей, особенно там, потому что 7 лет войны, уже 8-й год, это как бы о многом говорит, тем более сейчас, когда они там, люди сильно изолированы, скажем, не каждый человек может выехать оттуда, для них это тяжело. Верят, все надеются, ясное дело, у людей такое свойство надеяться, но...
Everyone wants this to end, but people are very pessimistic there.
Были настроены, они духом подупали.
Andriy is following the peace talks to resolve the situation in Donbass. Pain for the Donbass does not go away over the years. Andriy is well aware that keys open not only doors, locks and safes. The key to the peace also exists, but unfortunately it is not in Ukraine. The first thing is a ceasefire. It didn't exist, in fact. We know how many attempts have already been made. Until there is goodwill of Russia, this will not happen. Convincing an aggressive neighbor to play by fair and civilized rules, according to the Donetsk resident, is rather difficult task. If Russia is framed, the situation can be unpredictable. There could already be open aggression and war as a result. Leaders of the Normandy had restrained optimism in December 2019. Then Ukraine, Russia, Germany and France again agreed to promote a complete ceasefire, disengagement of military equipment and further steps aimed at a political settlement of the situation. The next meeting was announced for 2020, but the pandemic made adjustments first and then Moscow's already known position. The Kremlin has traditionally blamed Ukraine for the lack of security on the contact line. Although only in the period from July 2020 to July 2021, according to the National Security and Defense Council. The Information and Analytical Center for the National Security of Ukraine, 53 Ukrainian soldiers died in Donbass and 147 were injured.
Минские договоренности, есть Минские соглашения, смотрите, они же взаимообязывающие.
Minsk agreements are mutually binding.
Те 6 пунктов, которые они выполняют по части имплементации, которые указывал недавно, буквально накануне переговоров Байдена и Путина в Стокгольме глава Госдепартамента Блинкен, Лавров, о том, что не отводится тяжелое вооружение, не
Heavy weapons are not withdrawn, fire is not stopped.
Разрешение представителям со стороны Москвы, я подчеркиваю, ОБСЕ для мониторинга, не осуществляется обмена всех на всех заручников политических. Это не только между Киевом и Донбассом, ну, Ордлой имеется в виду, но и между Киевом и Москвой. Потому что в России содержатся такие же политические заручники. И они тоже должны быть включены в обмен и так далее. То есть
In fact, Moscow understands the Minsk agreements only as an obligation for Kiev and not as its own.
Свои обязательства.
For almost 3 years, the periodically declared truces in the Donbass have returned to the face of low-intensity shelling of the war and another loss of lives. In fact, the first point of the Minsk agreements, a complete and comprehensive ceasefire, remains unfulfilled all this time. However, the Kremlin, which has full control over illegal armed formations in the Donbass, doesn't see it as its fault.
Мы свою роль видим в том, чтобы
We see our role in being mediators in creating the best conditions for determining the future of the people who live in this territory.
на этой территории. Теперь с ними отказываются просто разговаривать. Объявляют их террористами.
Now they just refuse to talk to them, declare them terrorists. Explain why. Vladimir Putin calls his country as a mediator in the negotiations and repeats this like a mantra. But for some reasons represents the interests of only one of the parties. This is what, according to experts, puts the Normandy process to a standstill. In fact, the work of the Normandy format was blocked by Russia. Russia, according to experts and politicians, wants to destroy the Normandy format in order to try to force Ukraine into direct contacts with the separatists through the preservation of only negotiations in the trilateral contact group. This is the task of Russian Federation. Kyiv has repeatedly stated that it will never enter into direct negotiations with the representatives of the occupation administrations, because of the fact that they do not decide anything on their own.
Коли мені хтось починає говорити, а ось президент Російської Федерації каже, я говорю, будь ласка, хай він скаже.
When someone starts talking to me that president of the Russian Federation says something, let him tell me in your presence that we are not ready to do something.
Ми відкрито говоримо, ми готові зустрічатися з Російською Федерацією.
We say that we are ready to meet with the Russian Federation. We are not afraid of this in any format. Hopes for a new meeting of the leaders of the Normandy format countries throughout 2021 were small. The diplomatic efforts of the mediators, France and Germany, were ruined by the principled positions of the main negotiators. In the fall, it became clear that even the meeting of the heads of foreign affairs agencies would not take place. Russia decided to destroy all the cannons of diplomacy, putting on public the official correspondence with Berlin and Paris. Of course, we can joke and troll sarcastically, but in fact there is nothing good in this. Russia, by its actions, finishes off the Normandy format, demonstrates that it is not interested in its development, and of course undermines the remnants of confidence in itself. We agreed with our German and French colleagues that we would not let Russia to destroy the Normandy format. We will work to involve Russia in the negotiation process, in diplomacy efforts to resolve the situation. It became clear from the correspondence that France and Germany support precisely Ukrainian position of the situation in Donbass. They also do not consider the hostilities to be only internal problems of Ukraine and do not see the opportunity to conduct a direct dialogue with the occupation administrations.
Я розмовляв з політичними радниками Макрона, і вони кажуть, що ніколи.
I spoke with Macron's political representatives, and they said that the French president will never sit at the same table with representatives of the occupation administrations.
Це також позиція.
This is also a position that is absolutely beneficial to Ukraine.
Ми все одно будемо стукати і будемо намагатися, Україна, я маю на увазі, буде намагатися все ж таки
Ukraine will try to hold a summit of presidents.
Саміт президентів.
Although the diplomats of the four countries are working on a possible meeting of the leaders daily, the positions of the participants are united by one point. A new meeting for the sake of the meeting itself doesn't make any sense. German Chancellor Angela Merkel tried to persuade the opposing sides, especially the Kremlin, to a constructive approach. But her attempt was also unsuccessful. Angela Merkel tried to achieve this meeting. She was in Kiev and Moscow and negotiated about this. At the same time, it is obvious that Russia does not want to hold this meeting, at least until the spring of next year. The fact that Russia doesn't want to talk about the essence is obvious for a long time. Putin refused Zelensky's proposal to meet anywhere in the Donbass and reacted in the usual way, even when the president of Ukraine announced such a possibility in the parliament. We cannot stop the war without direct negotiations with Russia. Today, this has already been recognized by all international partners. We should speak understanding that we have a strong and powerful army. And don't be afraid to tell each other the truth. If we want to return Donbass, let's go, but if we want to go around and just talk about it, then let's do nothing.
В чем проблема для нас?
What is the problem for us?
Выстроить добрососедские отношения с Украиной.
We want to build good relations with Ukraine.
На все практически. Но как можно выстроить отношения сегодня?
But how can we build a relationship with today's leadership of Ukraine? It is almost impossible.
Ну, практически невозможно.
The Kremlin constantly accuses Kyiv of prolonging hostilities. But the twisting of the Russian president is that Ukraine submitted an action plan to resolve the situation in Donbass, which is fully consistent with international law. Its main points should be the withdrawal of all foreign and illegal armed formations from the territory of Ukraine, the abolition by the Russian authorities of a number of decisions and documents, such as the simplified procedure for obtaining Russian citizenship for residents of temporarily uncontrolled territories, and the resumption of control over the Ukrainian-Russian border. By the way, at the intermediate stage, this should be done by the OSCE monitoring mission, like a compromise before local elections.
Ми хочемо врегулювати декілька важливих питань, які стосуються припинення.
We want to resolve several important issues of the ceasefire regime, the exchange of prisoners, the most important issues for today, and the opening of the checkpoint.
КПВВ. Саме це повинні довести лідери нормандського формату до Російської Федерації. І результатом
This is what the leaders of the Normandy format should convey, and the result of this should be a meeting in the Normandy format if Russia is really interested in resolving this issue. Armed conflicts, bloodshed, this is absolutely not our choice. We do not want such a development of events. We want to resolve issues by political and diplomatic methods. Despite the words of the Russian leader, in addition to the shelling of Ukrainian positions in Donbass, military units of the Russian Federation, with a total number of about 300,000 military personnel, are still concentrated in the Ukrainian border from the north, east and south. Experts call this nothing more than a scare tactic in order to strengthen the Kremlin's position on keeping Ukraine out of NATO and to loosen sanctions on the part of the US and EU. This is no other interpretations, like Putin is trying to achieve a political result by creating this incredible tension. Moscow authorities make it clear the same thing, and of course, this slows down the development of any scenarios for a peaceful settlement of the situation in Donbass.
Ви бачите, що робить Росія зараз, вона шантажує Захід.
It is obvious what Russia is doing now. It is blackmailing the West and NATO.
І це безглузда тактика.
This is a reckless tactic that only makes things worse for itself.
І думка в світі вже така.
Such a very powerful opinion is already being formed in the world and not in favor of Russia. I think it will be forced to make concessions.
На піти на поступ.
Given the situation, Kyiv is forming an unprecedented coalition of allies. At the Eastern Partnership Summit in Brussels, Ukraine once again enlisted the support of European partners, in particular French President Emmanuel Macron, as well as the newly elected German Chancellor Olaf Scholz. The United States joined the negotiation process to prevent further Russian aggression. In a telephone conversation with Putin, the head of the White House, Joe Biden, unambiguously hinted to his opponent about the inadmissibility of another military invasion.
Та вони точно знають, якщо буде порушено суверенітет нашої держави, якщо, не дай Боже, впаде наша армія, слава Богу, що вона сильна завдяки їй.
They know for sure that if the sovereignty of our state is violated, if our army collapses, thank God that it is strong, their borders will be destroyed. At least there is such a possibility.
Така ймовірність є.
Despite all the efforts of diplomats, Moscow continues its aggressive rhetoric. The situation reached its peak just before the new year. Because of this, it was decided to hold a Russia-US meeting in Geneva. The talks, however, did not give results.
Если НАТО переходит на политику сдерживания, значит,
If NATO moves to a policy of containment, then it will be a policy of counter-deterrence in our part. If it's a deterrent, it's a counter-intimidation.
страшение.
США хотят, чтобы Россия вела себя как...
The US wants Russia to be like a normal neighbor and withdraw the troops from the border with Ukraine.
Граница с Украиной. Чтобы была стабильность в Европе, нужно решить...
In order for there to be stability in Europe, the situation in Ukraine needs to be resolved.
Это центрально...
Ukraine is central in this dialogue today.
Сегодня.
It is clear that Washington will become another party to the negotiations in order to restore peace in Donbass. The US does not plan to join the Normandy format, but it is determined to support it. This was stated by the US Assistant Secretary of State for European and Euro-Asian Affairs, Karen Dunfried, visiting Kyiv, Moscow and Brussels.
We listened closely to the request of our Ukrainian colleagues who have asked the United States to become more actively engaged in diplomatic efforts to revive the peace process. We are working closely with Ukraine and Russia to refocus their attention on implementing the Minsk agreements and to find a way to resolve the conflict peacefully.
The position of Ukraine is simple and rather clear. Kyiv is in favor of any format that would be effective. In addition, last year it became clear that Ukraine did not intend to wait until something was decided for it. Ukraine creates diplomatic platforms and surrounds itself with allies as much as possible, moving the center of political attraction to Kyiv. What is worth the founding summit of the Crimean Platform, a forum on the deoccupation of the peninsula, which joined more than 40 participating countries in the capital of Ukraine. In addition, cooperation between Ukraine and partner countries in regional unions is actively developing as part of the Lublin Triangle with Lithuania and Poland, as well as in the format of the associated trio with Georgia and Moldova. Ukraine, despite all the challenges and threats, meets 2022 with the strongest international positions during the years of independence. We know what we are capable of, we know where and how to go. Andriy knows that accuracy and a clear algorithm are also important in his work. However, he's also aware that in the issue of peace in the Donbass, not everything depends on the diplomatic efforts of Ukraine. Our hero is sure that in situation of constant confrontation with Russia, one cannot do without the help of allies.
Я считаю, что самый серьезный партнер, да, наш западный, кто мог бы повлиять, это...
As for me, the most serious partners who could influence are the US and the UK.
Которые они придерживаются. Их можно назвать серьезным противником.
They always have a clear position that they adhere to, and they can be called a serious adversary to Russia.
Что за нас никто не решит все проблемы.
It is clear that no one will solve all the problems for us. First of all, we need to strengthen our positions, including economy, military. But without help, it will be difficult for us. Russia, according to Andriy, is unlikely to make concessions in the near future.
Для них это способ давления на Украину, опять же.
This is a way of putting pressure on Ukraine, and they understand that in such a situation in which we are now, we cannot fully develop as a country. And for Russia, the development of Ukraine is something terrible. Native of Donetsk believes that in the negotiations on the Donbass, Ukraine needs to firmly stand on its principles. He would like to return and walk calmly as before in his peaceful native city, where he will not have to be afraid for his own life, where he will not be persecuted for views and for being a citizen of Ukraine. Of course, we can make some concessions. Donetsk, as for me who lives here and is related to the Donbass, should return, but not at any cost.
Чтобы вернулся мой родной Донецк, но не любой ценой, потому что
Because having yielded in something so important, you will have to yield furthermore.
Дальше больше.
Unfortunately, the keys to the peace are still hidden from Ukraine. To get them, it is important for Ukraine to work. Reported by Nikolai Reznik, specially for UATV.